The man who spit on my shoes and called me a worthless minimum wage slave had no idea I owned the building he worked in. The company he dedicated 10 years to. The $600,000 salary he bragged about. He had no idea that the old black man in the security guard uniform, the one he treated like absolute trash, was actually Alexander Stone, the billionaire CEO who'd built Sterling Industries from nothing into a $4.3 billion empire. I'd been working undercover as a gatekeeper for 3 weeks, living in a modest apartment, taking the bus to work, eating in the staff cafeteria. And what I discovered about my own company, about the people I trusted, about the empire I built, was so shocking, so disgusting, so criminal, that by the end of this story, 17 people would be arrested, 100 more would be fired, and I would question everything I thought I knew about success, loyalty, and human nature. If you're just starting this story, hit that subscribe button right now because what I'm about to tell you is the most eye-opening, jaw-dropping undercover investigation you've ever heard. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there, because this story will make you look at every service worker differently for the rest of your life. Let me take you back to how this all started, 3 months ago in my penthouse office on the 47th floor of Sterling Tower in Manhattan. I'm Alexander Stone, 56 years old, CEO and founder of Sterling Industries, a multinational conglomerate with divisions in tech, real estate, manufacturing, and finance. I started the company 32 years ago with $10,000 and a dream. Now it's worth billions. I have everything. The penthouse, the private jets, the houses in 5 countries, the cars, the wealth that means I'll never have to worry about money for 10 lifetimes. But that morning, something happened that would change everything. My executive assistant, Margaret, who'd been with me for 15 years, came into my office crying. "Margaret, what's wrong?" She was a professional woman in her 60s, always composed. Seeing her cry was alarming. "I'm sorry, Mr. Stone. I shouldn't bring personal problems to work. Talk to me. What happened?" She sat down, wiping her eyes. "My daughter works in the mailroom here. She's been saving money for college. This morning, she told me she's quitting, but why? Because she can't take the treatment anymore. The way the executives talk to the support staff, the discrimination, the harassment. She said working here is like being invisible unless someone needs to yell at you." I frowned. "That's not acceptable. Give me her name. I'll speak to her manager." "With respect, Mr. Stone, that won't help. You're at the top. You don't see what happens on the ground level. The culture here, it's toxic, but only if you're not important enough." Her words stung. "What do you mean?" "I mean the company you built has 2 classes of people. The executives who matter, and everyone else who's treated like they're disposable. And I don't think you know because people are very different when you're in the room." That night, I couldn't sleep. Margaret's words haunted me. Had I built a company that treated people badly? Was I so disconnected from reality that I didn't see it? The next morning, I called my head of security, James Walsh, former Secret Service, completely trustworthy. "James, I need you to help me with something unusual." "Anything, sir. I want to work undercover in my own company. As a low-level employee, I want to see what really happens when I'm not around." James studied me. That's risky, sir. If anyone recognizes you. That's why I need your help. I want a complete disguise. New identity. Background that checks out. I want to be invisible." "What position?" "Security. A gatekeeper. Someone who sees everyone coming and going but who nobody really looks at." James nodded slowly. "I can make that happen. But Mr. Stone, are you sure? What you might discover, it might not be what you want to see. I need to see it anyway." Over the next 2 weeks, James put together my cover. My new name was Marcus Williams, 63 years old, former military, now working security in his retirement years. He created a complete background, social security number, credit history, employment records, the works. I grew a beard and let my hair gray naturally instead of dyeing it. I gained 15 pounds, started wearing glasses, practiced walking with a slight limp, like I had an old war injury. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I didn't look like Alexander Stone, billionaire CEO. I looked like Marcus Williams, aging security guard just trying to make ends meet. My wife, Victoria, thought I was insane. "You're going to work as a security guard? Alexander, this is ridiculous. You're a billionaire. Why would you debase yourself like this?" "Because I need to know the truth about my company." "Then hire investigators. Don't humiliate yourself." "It's not humiliation. It's research." She didn't understand. But then again, Victoria had never worked a day in her life. She'd been born wealthy. She didn't understand what it was like to be treated as less than. I did. I'd grown up poor. My father was a janitor. My mother cleaned houses. I worked my way through college washing dishes and mopping floors. I'd built my empire from nothing. But had I forgotten where I came from? Had success made me blind? I was about to find out. If you're enjoying this story, Hit that like button right now. Comment below if you think CEOs should do this. This is just the beginning. My first day as Marcus Williams, Sterling Industries security guard, started at 5:30 a.m. I took the subway from the modest studio apartment James had rented for me in Queens, a far cry from my Central Park penthouse. The train was packed with working people heading to their jobs. Nobody looked happy. Everyone looked tired. I arrived at Sterling Tower at 6:15 a.m. for my 6:30 shift. I entered through the service entrance in the back, a door I'd never used in 32 years of owning the building. The security break room was in the basement. Fluorescent lights, cheap plastic chairs, a vending machine that looked like it was from 1995. The coffee maker was broken. My supervisor, a man named Ray Martinez, was there. "You must be the new guy. Marcus, right?" "Yes, sir." "Don't call me sir. I work for a living." He laughed at his own joke. "You'll be on the main entrance gate. Your job is to check IDs, monitor who comes in, keep the riffraff out. Easy work, pays shit, but it's steady." He handed me a uniform. It was at least 2 sizes too small and smelled like it hadn't been washed in a while. "Do we get new uniforms?" I asked. Ray snorted. "New uniforms? This ain't the Ritz, buddy. You wear what you get. If it doesn't fit, tough luck. Company doesn't care." I changed in the bathroom. The uniform was uncomfortable, but I reminded myself this was temporary. This was research. At 6:30, Ray took me to the main entrance gate, a podium by the front doors where security checked people in. "You sit here. You check IDs against the employee database on this tablet. If they're not in the system, they don't come in. If they give you attitude, call for backup. Simple. What if? Look, I'll be real with you. Most people will ignore you. They'll flash their ID and walk past without even looking at you. You're basically furniture. Get used to it." He left me there. At 7 a.m., the first wave of employees started arriving. Ray was right. Most people didn't even acknowledge me. They'd flash their badge, I'd scan it, they'd walk past. But some people were different. A young woman, probably mid-20s, smiled at me. "Good morning. You're new, right? I'm Jessica, from Accounting Bala Marcus. Nice to meet you. Welcome to Sterling. I hope you like it here." She was kind, genuine. It made me feel good. Over the next 2 weeks, I saw things that made me question everything I'd built. I saw executives berating service workers for the smallest mistakes. I saw young employees crying in bathrooms after being publicly humiliated. I saw managers taking credit for their subordinates' work. But the worst was what happened in week 2. I was working the evening shift, 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. Around 7 p.m., most of the executives had left, but I saw Richard Drake and 2 other senior VPs, Marcus Chen and Victoria Blackwell, heading toward the parking garage. They were laughing loudly, clearly drunk. There was a company happy hour at a bar across the street, and they'd obviously had too much. As they passed my desk, Victoria stumbled and knocked over my coffee cup. Hot coffee spilled all over my desk and my uniform. "Oops," she giggled. Richard laughed. "Careful, Vicky. Don't want to hurt the furniture." Marcus Chen high-fived him. Not one of them apologized. Not one helped clean up. They just laughed and walked away. I sat there in a coffee-stained uniform, my hands shaking with rage. These were people I paid millions to. People who represented my company. People who I thought shared my values. And they treated a security guard like he wasn't even human. I went to the bathroom to clean up. While I was there, I overheard 2 young employees talking in the hallway. "Did you hear about the layoffs?" "Yeah, 50 people from accounting. That's insane. The company's making record profits. Why are we laying people off?" "Because they need to hit their quarterly targets for executive bonuses. They're cutting support staff to maximize profit margins. Drake and Chen are getting 7-figure bonuses this year. That's disgusting. Meanwhile, I haven't had a raise in 3 years. None of us have. But hey, at least the executives are getting richer, right?" They walked away. I stood in that bathroom, coffee stains on my uniform, and I realized I'd created a monster. I'd built a company culture that valued profits over people. That treated executives like royalty and everyone else like servants. That rewarded cruelty and punished kindness. This wasn't the company I'd envisioned. This wasn't the dream I'd started with. I needed to dig deeper. I needed to know how bad it really was. So I started asking questions. During my breaks, I'd eat in the staff cafeteria. Not the executive dining room I usually used, but the basement cafeteria where support staff ate. I sat with janitors, mailroom workers, security guards, administrative assistants, people who actually kept the company running. And they told me everything. They told me about managers who yelled and threw things, about HR complaints that were ignored, about women who were sexually harassed and told to toughen up, about racial discrimination that was blatant but never addressed. They told me about the 2-tier system. Executives who had ergonomic chairs, private offices, catered lunches, and generous expense accounts, and support staff who had broken equipment, no break rooms, and were expected to work overtime for free. They told me about a culture of fear where speaking up meant being fired, where asking for a raise meant being labeled not a team player, where reporting misconduct meant retaliation. And they told me they stayed because they needed the paycheck, because they had families to support, because in this economy, you don't just quit a job, even if it's killing your soul. One woman, a single mother named Patricia who worked in the mailroom, told me something that broke my heart. "My daughter wants to be like me when she grows up," Patricia said. She says, "Mommy works at a big important company, and I don't have the heart to tell her that nobody at this big important company even knows my name. I've worked here 8 years. I've seen executives I directly report to pass me in the hallway and not even recognize me. Why do you stay?" I asked. "Because the health insurance covers my daughter's asthma medication. If I quit, I lose that. So I stay." And I smile. And I pretend I'm not dying a little bit inside every day. That night, I went home to my studio apartment in Queens and I cried. I cried for Patricia, for Jessica, for the young woman Richard Drake had humiliated, for every person who worked for me and was treated like they didn't matter. And I cried because I'd allowed this to happen. I'd been so focused on profits, on growth, on making Sterling Industries successful, that I'd forgotten the most important thing: the people who actually made it successful. But tears weren't enough. I needed action. I needed proof, documentation, evidence I could use to burn this toxic culture to the ground and rebuild it the right way. So I started recording everything. Tell me in the comments, have you ever worked somewhere toxic like this? Hit subscribe because what I discovered next involved actual crimes. Week 3 of my undercover operation. I'd been documenting everything, secretly recording conversations, taking photos, collecting evidence. But on Tuesday of week 3, I discovered something that went beyond toxic culture. I discovered actual criminal activity. I was working the night shift, 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. The building was mostly empty except for cleaning staff and a few workaholics. Around 11 p.m., I saw Richard Drake, Marcus Chen, and someone from accounting, a man named Derek Sullivan, getting off the elevator from the executive floor. They were carrying boxes, lots of boxes, loading them into Richard's car in the parking garage. Something felt off. I watched them through the security cameras. They made 3 trips, boxes and boxes of documents being loaded into Richard's Mercedes. After they left, I checked the security logs. Richard had used his executive override to disable the cameras on the 45th floor, the accounting and finance floor. Why would he do that? I couldn't investigate that night. But the next day, I mentioned it casually to Ray, my supervisor. "Hey, Ray, last night I saw some executives moving boxes out of the building late at night. Is that normal?" Ray shrugged. "Sometimes they work from home. Take files with them, but they disabled the cameras." Ray's expression changed. "They what?" Richard Drake used his executive override to turn off the 45th floor cameras. That's not supposed to happen. Security protocols say cameras stay on 24/7. Even executives can't override that without approval from the CEO. "Should we report it?" Ray looked uncomfortable. "Look, Marcus, I'm going to give you some advice. You're new, so you don't know how things work here. But rule number 1, don't ask questions about executives. They do what they want, and if you make trouble, you get fired. Understand? But if something illegal..." I said, "Don't ask questions. You want to keep this job? Mind your business." But I couldn't mind my business. Not when I owned the company. That night, after my shift ended at 2 a.m., I used my actual Alexander Stone credentials to access the building. I took the private elevator to my office on the 47th floor, used my personal key, sat down at my real computer, and I started investigating. I pulled up the security footage from the previous night. The 45th floor cameras had been disabled from 10:47 p.m. to 11:53 p.m. Right when Richard, Marcus, and Derek were there. I checked the access logs. They'd entered the records room, where we kept physical copies of important financial documents. Why would they need those? Everything was digital now. Unless they were documents they didn't want digitally tracked. I spent the next 4 hours going through financial records, and I found it. A shell company, hidden in our subsidiaries, called Sterling Solutions LLC. On paper, Sterling Solutions was a consulting firm that we paid $2.3 million a year for strategic advisory services. But when I dug deeper, I found that Sterling Solutions didn't actually exist. It had no employees, no office, no actual services provided. It was a fake company, created to funnel money out of Sterling Industries. And the registered owners of Sterling Solutions LLC? Richard Drake, Marcus Chen, and Derek Sullivan. They'd been embezzling millions from my company for at least 3 years. The boxes they'd removed last night? Probably the physical evidence of their fraud. I sat in my office, stunned. These were people I'd trusted, people I'd promoted, people I'd made rich, and they'd been stealing from me. But it got worse. I kept digging, And I found more shell companies, more fake vendors, more embezzlement. At least 8 executives were involved. They'd stolen over $47 million in the past 5 years. $47 million. While they laid off support staff to cut costs. While they denied raises to people like Patricia who couldn't afford to quit. While they treated low-level employees like trash. They'd been looting the company. I wanted to call the police immediately. Have them all arrested. But I needed more evidence. I needed to catch them in the act. So I set a trap. Subscribe and hit that like button. Tell me in the comments, what punishment should these executives face? This confrontation will shock you. The next morning, I called James Walsh from my Alexander Stone phone. James, I need your help. I've discovered major embezzlement. I need to catch them in the act. How much are we talking? At least $47 million. Maybe more. James whistled. Jesus. Who's involved? I gave him the names. 8 executives total. Including Richard Drake, my senior VP of operations. What do you want to do? James asked. I want to set up a situation where they'll incriminate themselves. Somewhere I can record everything. Then I'll reveal myself and call the police. When? Friday, the executive board meeting. I'll attend as Marcus Williams, the security guard. They won't recognize me, and I'll have everything I need to destroy them. James was quiet. Sir, are you sure? This is dangerous. If they realize who you are before you're ready. They won't. I've been invisible for 3 weeks. They see a uniform, not a person. That's the whole point. Friday came. The executive board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the main conference room. I arrived at work as Marcus Williams, wearing my security uniform. But in my bag, I had a recording device, a camera, and my CEO credentials. The board meeting was on the 46th floor. As a security guard, I had no reason to be there. But James had arranged for a security inspection of the conference room that morning. I took the service elevator up. The other security guard, a young guy named Tommy, was with me. Why are we inspecting the conference room? Tommy asked. Orders from Ray. Some VIP meeting today. They want to make sure everything's secure. We entered the conference room. It was empty. The meeting didn't start for an hour. I set up my recording equipment. Hidden camera in a plant. Audio recorder under the table. Everything concealed perfectly. Then Tommy and I left. I went back to my post at the main entrance. And I waited. At 10 a.m., the executives started arriving for the meeting. I watched them on the security monitors. Richard Drake, Marcus Chen, Derek Sullivan, Victoria Blackwell. All of them. Plus 3 others I'd identified as being part of the embezzlement scheme. Jennifer Morrison, head of procurement. David Walsh, head of facilities. And Sharon Kim, head of HR. 8 people total. All stealing. All about to confess without knowing I was recording everything. The meeting started. I watched on the security monitors, my heart pounding. For 30 minutes, they discussed normal business. Q3 projections. Marketing strategies. Expansion plans. Then Richard Drake said something that made my blood boil. We need to discuss the support staff layoffs. We're planning to cut another 75 positions before the end of the year. 75? Victoria Blackwell looked surprised. That seems excessive. We need to hit our profit targets, Richard explained. The board expects 15% growth this quarter. We can't do that without cutting costs. But we're already understaffed, Jennifer Morrison pointed out. If we cut 75 more people, we'll make do, Richard said firmly. Look, these are low-level positions. Mailroom workers, janitors, security. They're replaceable. And frankly, most of them are overpaid for what they do. Marcus is right, Derek Sullivan added. Besides, cutting their salaries increases our bonus pool. I don't know about you, but I could use a new boat. They laughed. Actually laughed about destroying people's livelihoods so they could buy boats. Then Marcus Chen said, speaking of bonuses, we need to discuss Sterling Solutions' quarterly payment. We're due for our next distribution. How much are we taking this quarter? Sharon Kim asked. $3.2 million, Richard said. Split 8 ways. That's $400,000 each. Are we sure this is still safe? Jennifer asked. We've been doing this for 5 years. Eventually someone's going to notice. Who's going to notice? Richard laughed. Stone? He doesn't even look at the detailed financials anymore. He's too busy playing billionaire. And the board trusts us completely. As long as we keep the profits high, nobody asks questions. Still, $47 million total is a lot, David Walsh said. Maybe we should stop. Stop? Marcus Chen looked offended. Why would we stop? This is the easiest money we'll ever make. Stone is oblivious. The auditors are paid off. We're untouchable. That was it. That was all I needed. I stood up from my security desk and walked to the elevator. Tell me in the comments right now, what would you do if you discovered this? Hit subscribe because the confrontation is about to happen. I took the elevator to the 46th floor. I walked down the hallway to the conference room. The door was closed. I could hear them inside, still talking, still laughing about how clever they were. I opened the door and walked in. 8 heads turned to look at me. Richard Drake's face twisted with annoyance. "What are you doing here? This is a private meeting." I didn't answer. I walked to the head of the conference table, where I usually sat as CEO, and I remained standing. "Excuse me," Victoria Blackwell said. "You need to leave. Now." I reached up and removed my glasses. Then I pulled off the fake beard. The room went completely silent. "Hello, everyone," I said. "I believe we need to talk about Sterling Solutions, LLC." You could have heard a pin drop. Richard Drake went pale. Marcus Chen's mouth hung open. Jennifer Morrison actually gasped. "Mr. Stone?" Victoria whispered, "Yeah, yes. Alexander Stone. Your CEO. The man you've been stealing from for 5 years. This isn't." Richard couldn't form a sentence. $47 million, I said, my voice cold. "That's how much you've embezzled from this company. From me, while laying off hard-working people to cover your theft, while treating employees like garbage, while pretending to care about Sterling Industries." "Mr. Stone, we can explain," Marcus Chen started. "Explain?" I laughed bitterly. "Explain how you created fake companies to funnel money into your pockets? Explain how you paid off auditors? Explain how you laughed about me being oblivious?" Derek Sullivan stood up. "You can't prove any of this, can't I?" I pulled out my phone and played the recording of their conversation from 10 minutes ago. Their own voices filled the room, confessing to everything. "We need to discuss Sterling Solutions' quarterly payment. $47 million total. Stone is oblivious. The auditors are paid off." When the recording ended, I looked at each of them. "I've been working undercover as a security guard for 3 weeks. I've documented everything. The embezzlement, the fake companies, the paid-off auditors, the discriminatory practices, the harassment, all of it." "You can't do this to us," Richard Drake said, his voice shaking. "We've given years to this company. You've given years of theft to this company. And now you're going to pay for it." I pulled out my real phone and dialed. "James, send them in." The conference room doors opened. 6 FBI agents entered, along with James Walsh and 3 police detectives. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, "you're all under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy." The FBI agents moved quickly. They read them their rights, handcuffed them, led them out of the conference room one by one. Richard Drake looked at me as they led him past. "You'll regret this, Stone. You can't run this company without us." "Watch me," I said. They were all arrested. All 8 of them. Taken to federal custody. Within an hour, the news broke. 8 Sterling Industries executives arrested for $47 million embezzlement scheme. The media went crazy. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. But I wasn't done. Subscribe right now because what I did next shocked everyone. The ending will restore your faith in humanity. The arrests were just the beginning. Over the next week, I conducted a complete investigation of Sterling Industries. With the help of federal investigators, internal auditors, and James Walsh's security team, we uncovered even more problems. The embezzlement was worse than I thought. Closer to $58 million over 7 years. 12 executives were involved, not 8. 4 more arrests were made. But we also found systemic problems that weren't criminal, just cruel. We discovered that HR had been systematically denying raises to support staff while approving massive bonuses for executives. We found evidence of discriminatory hiring practices. We found dozens of sexual harassment complaints that had been buried. We found that the layoffs Richard Drake had mentioned weren't necessary at all. The company was profitable. We just needed to stop embezzling millions. So I made changes. Big changes. First, I fired every executive who had been part of the toxic culture. Not just the criminals. Anyone who had treated employees badly, who had ignored misconduct, who had created the 2-tier system. 63 executives were let go. People making 6 and 7 figures who had forgotten how to treat people with dignity. Then I promoted people who actually deserved it. Patricia from the mailroom? I made her VP of Internal Services. She knew more about how the company actually ran than any executive. Jessica from accounting? Head of finance. Tommy, the young security guard? Head of security operations. People who'd been invisible were suddenly visible. People who'd been ignored were suddenly valued. I restructured the entire compensation system. Capped executive salaries at no more than 20 times the lowest paid worker. Put the money saved into raises for support staff. Patricia's salary went from $38,000 to $140,000. Every support staff member got at least a 40% raise. I renovated the staff break rooms. Gave everyone the same quality of workspace. Abolished the executive dining room. Now everyone ate in the same cafeteria, which I upgraded to be actually nice. I implemented zero-tolerance policies for harassment, discrimination, and bullying. Created anonymous reporting systems that went directly to an independent ethics board, not HR. And I started something I called Leadership Undercover. Every quarter, A different senior leader had to work undercover as a low-level employee for a week. To see what really happened. To understand what their employees experienced. The media covered all of it. Billionaire CEO goes undercover, discovers embezzlement and toxic culture, rebuilds company from the ground up. I did dozens of interviews. I told the story of my 3 weeks as Marcus Williams, of what I'd seen, of what I'd learned, and the response was overwhelming. Other CEOs reached out, asking how they could do similar investigations in their companies. Business schools invited me to speak. The story went viral, but the best response came from my own employees. 2 weeks after the arrests, I held an all-staff meeting in the lobby. Everyone attended, from executives to janitors. I stood in front of them and I said, 3 weeks ago, I worked as a security guard in this building. I did it because I'd heard rumors that our company culture was toxic, that people were being mistreated, and I needed to see for myself if that was true. What I found broke my heart. I found a company where some people were treated like royalty and others were treated like they were invisible. Where success meant stepping on others. Where profits mattered more than people. That's not the company I wanted to build. That's not the dream I started with 32 years ago. So, we're going to change. We already have changed. The criminals are gone. The bullies are gone. The people who forgot that every employee deserves respect, they're gone. What remains are the people who actually built this company. The people who showed up every day, did their jobs, kept things running even when they weren't appreciated. You are Sterling Industries. Not the executives. Not the shareholders. You. And from now on, this company will reflect that. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then someone started clapping. I looked. It was Patricia. Then Jessica joined in. Then Tommy. Then everyone. A standing ovation. From my own employees. Many of them crying. After the meeting, Patricia came up to me. Mr. Stone, I just want to say, thank you. For 3 weeks, I worked with you as Marcus. You listened to my stories. You treated me like a person. And you didn't have to do any of this. But you did. I should have done it sooner, I said. I should have been paying attention all along. But you did pay attention. That's what matters. You saw. And you fixed it. She hugged me. And I hugged her back. Tell me in the comments, do you think more CEOs should do this? Hit subscribe because the epilogue will surprise you. It's been 6 months since I revealed myself as Marcus Williams. 6 months since the arrests, the firings, the complete rebuild of Sterling Industries. The company is different now. Better. Employee satisfaction scores went from 42% to 91%. Turnover dropped by 70%. Productivity increased. Even our profits improved. Turns out when people are happy and treated well, they work harder. The embezzlement trials are ongoing. Richard Drake and the others are facing 15 to 20 years in federal prison. I'll testify against all of them. I recovered most of the stolen money, $51 million so far. I distributed it to employees as restitution bonuses. Every support staff member got a check. Patricia got $15,000. She cried when she saw it. Victoria, my wife, left me. She said she didn't recognize me anymore. That I'd lost perspective and was betraying my class. Good riddance. I don't need someone who thinks treating people with dignity is a betrayal. But the best part? I kept being Marcus Williams. Not full-time, but once a month, I still put on the security uniform. I still work the gate. I still eat in the cafeteria with the janitors and mailroom workers. Because I never want to forget what I saw. What I learned. How easy it is to become disconnected from the people who actually make your success possible. Last week, a new executive, someone I just hired, walked past the gate and didn't acknowledge me. Didn't say good morning. Just flashed his badge and walked past like I was furniture. The next day, in my CEO office, I called him in. Do you know who I am? I asked. Of course, Mr. Stone. You're the CEO. And yesterday, do you know who I was? He looked confused. Yesterday? I was the security guard at the front gate, the one you ignored. His face went white. Let me be clear, I said. In this company, every employee matters. From the CEO to the newest janitor. If you can't treat everyone with respect, you don't belong here. Understood? Yes, sir. I'm sorry, sir. Don't apologize to me. Apologize to Marcus Williams, the security guard. He's here every day, making sure people like you get into the building safely. He deserves your respect. The executive learned. They all learn. Because that's the culture now. That's what Sterling Industries stands for. Not profits at any cost. Not executive egos and corner offices. People, dignity, respect. For everyone. My name is Alexander Stone. I'm a billionaire CEO who spent 3 weeks disguised as a security guard in my own company. What I discovered destroyed the company I thought I knew. But it allowed me to build something better. Something real. I learned that wealth doesn't make you better than anyone else. That every job matters. That the person cleaning your office or checking your ID or delivering your mail is just as important as the person in the corner office. I learned that success means nothing if it's built on the suffering of others. And I learned that it's never too late to change, to do better, to remember where you came from. If this story touched you, if it made you think about how you treat service workers, how you view people based on their job title, then I've accomplished what I set out to do. Hit that subscribe button. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for staying until the end. And remember, the next time you walk past a security guard, a janitor, a server, a cashier, look them in the eye. Say hello. Treat them like the human being they are, because you never know. That person might be someone powerful in disguise. Or more importantly, they might just be someone who deserves your respect regardless of who they are. My name is Alexander Stone. This was my story, and I'm still living it every single day. Did you like this story? Which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more real-life stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.